Hi. For the Week 6 group discussion, we will be discussing Aren't I a Woman, Chapters 3 and 4. An overview of what we will be covering includes the life cycle of the female slave, including children, teens, and young adulthood. We will also be discussing the female slave network, including slave women in groups and female bonding. At the end, we'll go over our discussion questions. To begin, we will take a look at enslaved female children. Typically, children were segregated from enslaved adults who were working most of the day. However, children were not segregated by gender. Both shared similar responsibilities in work, including being nurses, also known as babysitters. Children were also companions in play, partaking in games such as Smut and Catch Me If You Can, also known as tag. Enslaved children grew up thinking that they were equal in terms of gender. Black girls spent a lot of their time in a sexually integrated atmosphere until reaching adulthood. When enslaved girls became teens, gender role separation was more distinct. Work gangs or trash gangs were formed, which were mostly female. These gangs taught girls about slave life and sex life related to marriage and their future hardships as slaves. Slave mothers would protect and shelter their children from the responsibilities of enslaved adulthood. After adolescence, when enslaved women reached young adulthood, bondwomen had the pressure of childbearing that free women did not. Masters expected women to reproduce, which was done either forcefully or through visitation privileges with males from other plantations. At times, marriages were also allowed between slaves in order for reproduction.
Chapter 4 focused on the female slave network. So for this first slide, it's about slave women in groups. Most of the women would function in groups. This is where they gain their strength from. They would gain it from their numbers. They had the same responsibilities and problems as each other. They developed their own female culture because of this, and due to all of this, their bond to one another was made stronger. Women who ate together, sang work songs together, and would be with each other all the time during the day were the same ones that had the same responsibilities and problems as each other. Overall, they developed their own notions about what women should be and how they should act. So for this next slide, it is about female bonding. This slide focuses on the healthcare and doctor women. So for healthcare, slave women were dependent on each other for childcare. Parents, siblings, friends, and relatives served in different capacities as buffers against the internalization of infantile roles, but this mostly applied to females when it came to the childcare of slave women. They could also not be outspoken about their needs if they needed like an abortion or something. They could not really be outspoken about that, and this led to midwives conspiring with female patients to induce abortions. This is why many of the slave women got away with abortions, because they would come together and not let anybody know that it happened. Slave owners were not able to get into the lives of slave women, and therefore did not know about many of the abortions that the slave women were having. So when it comes to doctor women, slave women and their children would depend on doctor women to treat a variety of ailments. Professionally trained white doctors played a limited role in female slave care as well. This also applied to male slave herb doctors. They would not really help female slaves either. Doctor women would make broths from leaves and bark of trees, catnip, tobacco, and other natural products. Menstrual cramps sometimes be treated tea made from the bark of a gum tree. And elderly and middle-aged black women tended to the slave population most of the time. Okay, we have two discussion questions. The first one is going to be on chapter 3 and the second one on chapter 4. So for the first one, we saw in chapter 3 that slave mothers hid the reality and fact about sex and childbirth from their daughters in order to protect them. Do you believe this was the right choice? Why or why not? For the second one is, what do you think the outcome would have been if the slave women did not have each other to rely on? Like, what would the differences have been?